Shalom to everyone. Good to see you all. And today I'd like to, it's really a continuation from last week, but it's a new share. If you're not here last week, it's not a problem. Why is it a continuation? Because last week we spoke about something called Uvdin D'Choil. And Uvdin D'Choil is this general category of things that are, call them not Shabbos-tic, right? Inappropriate for Shabbos. And we saw a range of opinions concerning how much can you extend this concept of Uvdin D'Choil, that it's not appropriate, it's not Shabbos-tic, it's not, for example, we saw a discussion about umbrellas, right? Is an umbrella a problem because it's not Shabbos-tic, it's Uvdin D'Choil. We spoke about, I didn't know what, playing table tennis and other issues. But today, I would like to speak about another category, which is called Avsha Milsa. Avsha Milsa means things that are noisy, okay? Avsha Milsa, that they make a lot of noise. Now, Avsha Milsa, Avsha means noisy, and Milsa means things, right? So noisy things, right? Avsha Milsa, noisy things. Now, as we'll see, this is a more, I would say, a more concrete or a more well-defined category. You can't say, well, everything is Avsha Milsa, right? This is something which is specifically things that make a noise. And we'll speak later about how much noise and what kind of noise and so on. But I'll just mention it's very relevant, meaning this is the main issue for questions like, can you use an alarm clock on Shabbos? Can you get your radio to come on to wake you up in the morning? Can you, I don't know, can you switch on your dishwasher on Shabbos? All right. Has anyone ever wanted to use a dishwasher on Shabbos? Your wife has. Well, I hope you told her not to. Now, there are several reasons, actually, for why you might not want to use a dishwasher on Shabbos. One of them we'll discuss is Avsha Milsa. There's some others that I'm not going to get into today. But can you leave your dishwasher running from before you put it on before Shabbos? It's running into Shabbos. Is that okay? What about the washing machine? Can you leave, you've forgotten to do laundry and now you want to put the washing machine on, but it's 5 minutes before Shabbos. Can you put the washing machine on and leave it running into Shabbos? Or is that some kind of a problem? Okay. So these are the issues that we're going to discuss today. And there are many others that could be very relevant for this. So it's an important discussion in our modern day Shabbos activities. By the way, one of the big questions of Avsha Milsa is using microphones, speakers. Can you use a microphone or a speaker on Shabbos? And if not, why not? Right? Hearing aids, maybe. Okay, so a lot of interesting questions, all in a very short space of time. And we already have a question from the audience. Yes, Andy. Okay, but why is that a problem? I don't know. Okay, let's add it. I've added it. It's on the list. You want to add those too? All right. We've added it. Okay, come on. Take it easy now. All right. So before we start speaking about Avsha Milsa, let's just define where we are and where we're not. There's an important sugya in the Gemara, in Masechah Shabbos, based on the Mishnah. The Mishnah tells us that there's a machlokus between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, very famous machlokus between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel concerning whether or not you're allowed to leave a malacha going on from before Shabbos into Shabbos. Okay? According to Beis Shammai, that's a problem. According to Beis Hillel, that's mutter. It's the first source on page 1. Beis Shammai mean shirim dioi, v'samamonim v'charsh. These are paints. These are the way that you make paints is by soaking some kind of a substance, whether it's hops or some other substance, in water. And by soaking it in water, that water becomes paint. Are you allowed to leave that soaking from before Shabbos and then going into Shabbos or not? Beis Shammai say no. Beis Hillel say yes. On this, we paskin, of course, like Beis Hillel, right? And this machlokus is a question of what is this machlokus? This machlokus is a question of, meaning on Shabbos, I'm not allowed to do a malacha. But am I allowed to leave my kalim, my utensils, my vessels, my property, that they should do the malacha on Shabbos? According to Beis Shammai, that's a problem. According to Beis Hillel, that's not a problem. So let's get this out of the way. This is this is not a halachic question. But one of the examples that the Gemara brings, when this is a Yud Ches Amud Aleph, okay, you see it's the second source on page 1, in the middle, or a third of the way down the Amud of the Gemara, is Aval Ein Noisnim Chitin Harichayim Shamayim. You mustn't put wheat into a millstone, okay? Harichayim Shamayim. There's a question why especially Shamayim. Won't get into it now. Only if they'll be ground from before Shabbos. Meaning, if this millstone is going to be continually grinding into Shabbat, then it's forbidden. Then it's asur. Okay. Why not? What's the problem with this millstone? Okay. So on that, there's a machlokus in the Gemara. Look at Haima. The Gemara says, why not? Right? What's the problem? So, Amarabba, mipnei shemashma'as koil, because it makes a loud noise. Okay, so according to Rabbah, this is a new problem. This isn't our problem, our conventional Beis Shammai Beis Hillel problem of shvisas kelim, of allowing your property to do a malacha. No, this is a new issue of making layers. All right, that's Rabbah. Then Rav Yosef says no. I'm going to Rav Yosef leimama mishum shvisas kelim, and then he brings a price of v'chulei, right? The Tana v'chol hashamat l'chem tishmeru shvisas kelim, and I'm Rav Yosef mishum shvisas kelim, shvitat kelim. So according to Rav Yosef, this is familiar territory. According to Rav Yosef, this is the regular question of shvisas kelim, and we know about that. Meaning, we know that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, like Beit Hillel. Now we're not worried about shvisas kelim, but according to Rabbah, we have something new, a new category of hashmas koil, making a loud noise. Okay, so according to Rabbah, this is going to be a problem, because in terms of making a noise, now we don't have any psak. This is not a Beis Shammai Beis Hillel closed case. We pass like Beis Hillel, not like Beis Shammai. If there's a problem of hashmas koil, then we're in potential trouble. What does Rashi explain, by the way? Rashi says, right? Rashi says there's an underlining under the Rashi here, right? Sheyitachenu mibaydioi mipnei shemashmas es hakoil milsa b'Shabbos. You're making a noise. It's things that make a noise on Shabbos. Ve'ikaz zilusa, says Rashi, this is a certain zilusa, meaning it's a disdain, it's something which is derogatory for Shabbos. It's not the honor of Shabbos that you should have this stuff making loud noises on Shabbos. Okay, it's inappropriate. It's not Shabbos-dik. Now, if we think now about the halacha, so the question will be, who do we pass Rav Yosef? So we already find on the page, Tosfos says we paskin like Rabbah, right? Tosfos says it's at the bottom, the final source on the page. It starts. It's the Tosfos that begins. Well, we can start on the second source of the page. The Tosfos right at the bottom, right? Omer Rabbeinu Tam Rav Yosef, right? Rabbeinu Tam says the halacha is like Rav Yosef. Ulefize, the end of the line. Ulefize rechaim utarim. So we're not worried because the fi beis hillel shari, it's mutter. There's no problem. Says Tosfos again, v'li nera, at the end of the last line there. V'li nera dereisha lo mokelak beis Shammai ela shasu dekama hachi hamani beis Shammai. Meaning Tosfos says, interpreting the gemora. The gemora doesn't mean to decide the case that this is beis Shammai, but rather it's like beis hillel. Aval Rav Yishaya matina lemeba demokelak beis hillel v'yesh le'ashmas koil karaba v'chein pasak Rav Meir Rottenberg, that the halacha is like beis hillel, but over here there's a separate problem of ashmas koil. So we see that Tosfos rules like Rabbah, but Rabbeinu Tam ruled like Rav Yosef. However, Tosfos goes on to say, no, v'li nera, the halacha is like Rabbah. We'll move on to page 2. So we'll see that this finds its way into the Torah. All right, it says the Torah. This is the Torah in Siman Rishon and Beis. This is preparations for Shabbos, right? So it says the Torah. Aval asalas is chitin l'toich rechaim. Asur atet chitin. You're not your wheat in this grinding stone, the mill. They have to be finished before. Why? Given the Avsha Milsa Tfei, because it's a loud noise. Ika ziluta the Shabbos. So this is a ziluta the Shabbos. It's problematic. And the Beis Yosef here brings these sources that I've already mentioned, Rabbah and Rav Yosef, and so on. That's the Beis Yosef. Now, no, the Rambam, which I haven't brought here, there's a reason why I haven't brought the Rambam, and the reason is because there is no Rambam. The Rambam doesn't mention this, doesn't get into the Rambam, right? This halacha does not make it into the Rambam. And if I remember correctly, the Beis Yosef mentions this at the end. Okay, look at the end of the Beis Yosef, underlined, meaning the end of the Beis Yosef relevant to this part. It's the end of the first column at the bottom. Inyan halacha, says the Beis Yosef. Kivan Sharif ve'Rambam ve'Rabbeinu Tam matirim. Right? How does he know that the Rambam is matir? Because the Rambam doesn't mention it. And the Rif quotes the Gemara but doesn't say what the halacha is like. And the Beis Yosef understands from there, if the Rif would have wanted us to be machmer, the Rif would have said that the halacha is like Rabbah. So we've got a Rif, we've got a Rambam, and we already saw Rabbeinu Tam, who says that the halacha is like Rav Yosef. And we've got these big three. So even though the Rosh is machmer, right? The Rosh is the like the Tosfos, he's machmer, but the Beis Yosef often goes among the big three, right? The big three is Rambam, Rif, Rambam, Rosh. If he has 2 out of 3, he'll go with 2. And over here he says, I've got 2 out of 3. I have the Rif and the Rambam, and they're matir, and therefore we're going to be matir. He says, places where there's a minig to be machmir, because we follow the minig. Moshe, right? Because Moshe is the Ramah. He says, we should be machmir on this. Kadasa Tosfos. Right? Marivail, Simon Kuflama, Denagad Lechumra. And he says, Clear mashkolas shakirin zeiger. Who knows what a zeiger is in Yiddish? Where? A clock, monteur. Montre. Horloge, merci. Horloge. By the way, horloge is also a word used sometimes in Rashi uses horlogin when he wants to speak about a clock. It's Old French, horloge. A zeiger, a clock, a watch. So the Ramah already, the Dayan Yehoshua Moshe, they already had mechanical clocks in the time of the Dayan Yehoshua Moshe, right? They had mechanical clocks. And says the Dayan Yehoshua Moshe, when you have these klei mashkolas, using weights, the balancing weights, that they tell the time, that it makes a noise on Shabbos. You mustn't wind it up before Shabbos, right? Because it's going to make a loud noise. So you mustn't wind up your clock before Shabbos if it's a cuckoo clock. Okay, these cuckoo noise, right? Also, I guess they had these mishkoles clocks that even without the cuckoos, they made a very loud, a significantly loud noise. We'll see how loud the noise has to be. But we see that the Ramah is worried about this. Okay, the Ramah says that Nagula Isser. Okay. Now, so far, what have we seen? We've seen that there's a machlokus in the Rishonim, the Rambam doesn't exist. According to Tosfos, it's Asur. The Torah says it's a problem. The Beis Yosef says, and the Dayan Yehoshua Moshe says one should be machmir. But why? Because it makes a noise. What's the problem with noise? Who cares about noise? So far, what have we seen? Ziluta de Shabbos. It's disrespectful. It's showing a certain disrespect towards Shabbos to have stuff going on that's making a loud noise. But if we'll look now in the Agur, which is the source at the bottom of page 2, the Agur that's over here, it's one of the Rishonei Ashkenaz. Okay, one of the Rishonei Ashkenaz, Mari Vail, which we just saw quoted in the Dayan Yehoshua Moshe. Mari Vail is one of the Rishonei Ashkenaz. The Agur is another one of the Rishonei Ashkenaz. And the Agur seems to give a slightly different reason. The Agur says as follows: Nish'al Muri Avi, Mari Landau, Al Zuga Mekashkesh, right? Zuga Mekashkesh. It's a clock, right? It's a Zug, Zuga Mekashkesh. It's like this parallel weights or parallel whatever they had that makes a loud noise. HaMekashkesh leSha'ot. Asur Adei Mishkolot. There's a mechanism of weights. Can you prepare it in advance that it will go on making this loud noise the whole of Shabbos? Maybe this is similar, like putting your wheat inside the millstones. Avsha Milsa, what's the problem with Avsha Milsa? What is our concern for things that make a noise? So he says, people are going to say that this guy is working on Shabbos. They're going to say that he's left his mill open to work on Shabbos. That's the problem. Right? He's putting in his wheat on Shabbos. Meaning, what's he saying? That the problem isn't disrespect. The problem is suspicion, right? People are going to be suspicious that this guy is doing a malacha on Shabbos. That's the problem. It's not disrespect. It's a suspicion. It's a type of marisain. Yes. Well, this the Gemara innovates. The Gemara has the right to innovate. You're right that we don't have the right of many poskim to innovate our new maris ains. However, Chazal did have, and Chazal gave us this category. And now once we have this category, so anything that makes a loud noise, even a clock, which wasn't around in the times of Chazal, will fit into this problem of Avsha Milsa. meaning it's already a separate type of marisain called Avsha Milsa on Shabbos, and this is going to be a problem of suspicion of marisain. So says the this is all going to be discussed. Absolutely. Yes, Andy.
Well, there's that philosophical question. There's sound but nobody hears it. Sound really made. So my question is, let's say you have
it's like Schrödinger's cat or something.
You have a sound, but it's in a locker room and nobody hears it.
Yeah.
Like our air conditioner is so old and makes a terrible sound.
We're going to speak about air conditioners. Really? To get a new heater, that sounds bad. Good. Right. Yeah, you're adding to the list. Right. Also a good question, right? Does this noise have to be heard by someone? Or are we not worried, meaning even if there's no one home, then it's mutter, or only if someone's home, then it's also? We'll speak about that in a moment. Good questions. I'm sorry? During COVID, it's all mutter. Yeah, don't quote me on that one. Yes.
I once visited a place in Georgia which had historic sites, and it had a grist mill there, which was powered by a water wheel, and it was very noisy. It is so noisy you have to yell to be heard when you're inside with a grist mill going.
That's great. That is exactly the case of the gemora. That's nice. Thank you. So you actually heard this. It's very noisy. Okay, good. So the question will be, what level of noise, what level of decibels do we have to consider over here? Okay, good. So in any case, the augur says that the problem isn't disrespect, but rather suspicion. And based on that, what's going to be the din of the watch, of the clock? Says the augur, this is not a problem concerning our clocks. Everybody knows every day you set it for the next day. You don't do anything during the day when it's making its noise. And that's the minig. The minig says the augur is that we're not worried about clocks. Clocks are good, even though they make a noise. Why? Because they don't raise suspicion. Okay? Because everybody knows that you set it once a day, doesn't raise suspicion. All right. Now let's see. Let's see how we paskin some of this. Okay, let's see how we paskin some of this. First of all, we've got, let's skip page 3. That's interesting, but not for now. And let's move on to the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, page 4. This is our Shulchan Aruch. Says the Shulchan Aruch. Umata lasa ischitin, this is Rishon base. Okay, this is Rishon base. Umata lasa ischitin letoich reichayim shel mayim samach lechashecha. The Shulchan Aruch is not worried, like we saw. The Beis Yosef says it's all fine. He's not worried about making noise on Shabbos. Okay, that's the Shulchan Aruch, like we saw in the Beis Yosef. Says the Ramah, we're not worried about a shmas koil. Look at why. The Ramah is already bringing the augur, right? The Ramah is bringing, what's the problem? The problem is suspicion. And some prohibit. Some are always worried in any place where there's a loud noise being made. We're machmir. Mihu, however, if it's a place where there's a loss, where you're losing out income, money, something, then one can be makel on this. Meaning, there's a machlokus, we're machmel lechatchila. However, if there's a makom hefsed, one can be makel. Says the Rambam, umata lahamid kli mishkoles, shekerin zayger me'erev Shabbos. You're allowed to put your clock on, like we saw in the Augur. And why? Because we all know that the way is that it's around from yesterday, and therefore there's no suspicion. Well, people are not going to say that yesterday because they'll assume that you set it from yesterday. If it's something that the normal way is not to leave it from yesterday, but rather to do it continually, that's the problem. Like the Rechaim, you continually put your wheat into the grinding stone. How did you call it? Grist mill. Okay.
The one I went to was corn.
Was a corn mill. Okay. Now, just by the way, I'll say this, B'derech Agav, it's interesting to see, because the Mishbura on the one hand says at the beginning, look at the Mishbura, he says at the beginning, Klal b'zeh kol ki t'b'dei mishmi'a kol the Avsha Milsa v'ika zilusa l'shabasa. The Mishbura says it's a zilusa de Shabbos, which we saw already in Rashi. You remember? Rashi says zilusa, disrespect. And this is a problematic Mishnah Berurah, because clearly the Ramah paskans that it's not a problem of disrespect, it's a problem of suspicion. And the Mishnah Berurah himself, later on, he says, right, look at Seif Koton Nun, Ki hakol yodim v'lo yachshadu shehem midei b'Shabbos, and they won't suspect him, right? So apparently the Mishnah Berurah is, as it were, reconciling these two opinions. He's saying, well, it's a disrespect, but the entire disrespect is because people are going to be suspicious. I think it's a stray. I think that these are two different opinions. We have Marivail, who says clocks are forbidden because it's disrespectful, and we have the Augur, who says clocks are permitted because it's not a problem of disrespect, it's a problem of suspicion. The Mishnah Berurah puts them together, and he says the Zilusa de Shabbos and the suspicion, they kind of go together. Just pointing that out because it's an interesting thing to notice. The mill.
So mill is one of the malachas. So is that significant that the example in Mara is actually malacha, whereas the clock, for example, is a malacha?
Well, it's a good question, and this is the poskim speak about whether the mill is actually a doraisa or a darabanan, because you're not grinding yourself; it goes round by water power, and therefore the question is it doraisa or darabanan? Magen Avram speaks about it. Other poskim speak about it, and some say that it's doraisa, but when there's a darabanan malacha, there won't be a problem. Then we agree that it doesn't make a difference. Whether it's darabanan, a rabbinic prohibition, or a doraisa prohibition, either way, there's a problem of this suspicion. And therefore, even for setting a clock, which again, this is another question, the mechanical watches, is it mutter to wind them up? Right? That's a question on our modern day watches. For their clocks, it was definitely one kind of prohibition or another. Many of them say it's makabeh patish, at the very least, the Rabbanan version, to put your clock in order. This is going back to the 16th century clocks. So then there would be some prohibition involved, and therefore this would raise this suspicion. I'll just mention very interestingly, Rav Moshe Feinstein. I'm just wondering if I brought this Rav Moshe here. No, there's a few tshuvas of Rav Moshe that speak about this. In one of the tshuvas, no, I didn't bring this. In one of the tshuvas, he asks a contradiction in he has a contradiction in the Shulchan Aruch, in the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, because I'll just read you out from my notes. The Shulchan Aruch later on, just a minute. Yeah. Shulchan Aruch says that sometimes, Rav Moshe says, it's in Chelik Gimel Siman Nun Hey. Rav Moshe said that sometimes the Shulchan Aruch will agree that something that makes a noise is forbidden, meaning even for Sfadim. Rav and Rav Yosef is very busy with it. He says for us, for Sfadim, we're okay. Why are we okay? Because the Shulchan Aruch is matter. You guys, Ashkenazim, you have a problem. But we, us Sfadim, we're okay. He's speaking about a dishwasher. We'll speak about this in a minute. But Rav Moshe says, you know what? No, even Sfadim have a problem. Why is that? Because he says, we find in the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Shin Lamed Ches, that he brings the auger. He says that it's mutter to use a clock on Shabbos, meaning to wind it up or to do whatever you need to do before. And the Shulchan Aruch says, why? Because everybody knows that you did it before. Okay? Everyone knows that you fix it up once a day. So says Rav Moshe, we see that even the Shulchan Aruch agrees that this prohibition exists and that the clock is mutter because there's no. So Rav Moshe says that Dafka the Rechaim is a problem. I'm sorry, Dafka the Rechaim is mutter. Why is that? Because it started from before Shabbos. But something that doesn't start from before Shabbos, let's say it would start on Shabbos, then even the Beis Yosef will agree that it's Aser. That's what Rav Moshe says. Rav Moshe says that even the Shulchan Aruch will agree that the only time that it's mutter is when it starts from before Shabbos, like the Rechaim case. But if it's something which is starting on Shabbos, then that's worse. And then even the Shulchan Aruch will agree that it's Aser. Shin Lamed Ches. Seif Gimel. Exactly. But why is he matter it? Only because there's no suspicion. But if there would be a suspicion, it would be Aser. Afarani Tachas Kapos Ragli Rav Moshe, but other poskim don't agree to this. And I think the reason why is because, number one, what he's saying is very difficult. Because if you paskin like Rav Yosef, then, meaning like the Shulchan Aruch, then there's no source for any prohibition of something making a noise. And if you paskin like Rabbah, then everything should be Aser. Meaning, where's the source for this midway psak that's halfway between Rabbah and Rav Yosef? Like, there's no such position in the Gemara. It doesn't exist. And concerning Rav Moshe's question, I would hazard that the Shulchan Aruch is just quoting the auger. So he brings he quotes the whole text. But Enechanami, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you don't need the reason of the auger. It's mutter because we're not worried about noise on Shabbos. But he quotes the entire text. And the Shulchan Aruch, sometimes does this, like he brings it in the Beis Yosef and he quotes it in the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't mean that he's not paskening like Rav Yosef and that it's mutter completely. Anyway, this is the machlokus between the Shulchan Aruch, who says that everything is mutter, we're not worried about being mashmiya koil, and between the Rabbah, who said that we do have a problem of hashmas koil. And now let's talk about alarm clocks, okay? Because one of the earliest questions that was discussed in this sense is alarm clock. We've had alarm clocks for a fairly long time, right? These mechanical alarm clocks, that have this chiming sound that makes it's very loud, right? Really loud alarm clocks. And then the question is, are you allowed to use these alarm clocks on Shabbos or not? So on this we have Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe is on page 5 at the top. Igros Moshe. And Rav Moshe, first of all, Rav Moshe gives us a definition of what's considered Avsha Milsa. How many decibels do you need? Okay. So says Rav Moshe, let's just read it from the beginning. Right? לעניין להעמיד שעון, שיש בדבר מצלצל לפני שבת על הזמן שיצלצל Shabbat b'boker. Okay, you want to put on your alarm clock. It's a bit of a roundabout wording, but the point is you want to set your alarm clock before Shabbos that it should go off on Shabbos. Right? It should make a loud noise Shabbos morning. כדי שיעירו לזמן התפילה. דבר mitzvah. You want to get up on time for your davening. Okay. What about if you want to wake up before davening to read the newspaper? Don't entertain such a possibility. You want to get up for davening. Hine, he says, Imu kol kazeh, if it's a type of noise, sheloi nishma ele b'chadroi, shehu le'atmoi, ein b'zeh isur. If it's only going to be heard by you alone in your room, then it's fine. Then it's not a problem. Avali says, Im nishma gam chutz michadroi, shenishba leharbei halanim bebeisai. It's going to be heard by many who are sleeping in your home. So look at his vision for how loud it needs to be. It needs to be something which is heard beyond the confines of your own room, okay? Or if you're alone in the house, then it would need to be beyond the confines of your house, okay? He says it very clearly, right? If you're in your room and there are people in your house, then the problem is if it's heard beyond your room. The same thing, Kol Sheken, he says, K'shenishma lachutz, if it's heard outside your house, which is, by the way, very common. If it's a loud alarm clock, then, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I hear alarm clocks. You'll have to speak louder. So yeah, according to Rav Moshe, if it's your floor, and that floor is exclusive to you, and it's only heard on that floor and not on the floor beneath, then you'll be okay, because that's not Avsha Milsa. There's nobody else who's going to hear it other than in your domain. Your floor is your domain, and that's it. If it's a Shabbos, well, let's see this Rav Moshe. Let's finish the topic of alarm clocks, and then we'll speak about your latest money-making scheme. Do they really? Someone's taking your. No, but it's this. You'll have to apply your common sense for this. Too many rules. You'll have to apply common sense. You know, it depends on how loud your alarm clock is and whether it's audible for other people, you know, but it's really common sense on that. Anyway, says Rav Moshe, if your alarm clock is the alarm clock, then he says it's like the Reichayim. Also, Mizum Gzera Shashmas Koil says it's forbidden. Like the Ramah Paskans said it's not good. Now, he says, well, 1 minute. What about, we know that you're allowed to use a clock, even though it makes a noise, right? But then he says, you know what, that doesn't help us for our case. Why? He says that in the second column, he says like this. He says, when do you set your alarm clock? What's the normal way to set the alarm clock? When do we set the alarm clock? Before we go to sleep. Now, if you set the alarm clock before you go to sleep, then when are you setting it? on Shabbos. So it says Rav Moshe, alarm clocks I'm not happy with, because if we're worried about suspicion, then in the alarm clock case, there is a suspicion, because someone hears the alarm clock, he's going to say, 1 minute, this guy set it on Shabbos. He set it the night before on Shabbos. And therefore, this has a real suspicion. So this case of a loud noise, however we define it, is going to be a problem of suspicion, because people are going to think that you set it the night before. If there's an alternative of heter. Correct. However, says Rav Moshe, because over here we've got a separate category, they made a special prohibition against loud noises, so we can't apply the regular svaros of Marisayin. We have a special prohibition against loud noise. Now the reason for that is this suspicion, but we have to be clean of suspicion in order to be matter, in order to permit loud noises on Shabbos. However, right, but when did he set it? Well, that's a nice point. Meaning, if he's doing it to get up for shul, then he probably hasn't said it at night. That's true. However, where I grew up, a lot of people drove to shul in the morning. So maybe they were setting it, to drive to shul. Who knows? Let me just say this. I want to get to other stuff also. So on alarm clocks, the broad consensus of poskim is to be matir alarm clocks on Shabbos. Even the Rav Moshe is machmir for alarm clocks, but Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, I think it's here on page 5. Where is it? He says it's mutter. He says you mustn't set it on Shabbos. However, it's mutter to set it before Shabbos, and that's okay. And then he's busy with, can you stop the alarm clock on Shabbos? These are different issues. And if you look in the footnote, on footnote 65, Samachay says in the middle, he says, what about Avsha Milsa? And then he says that nowadays people know that you set it before Shabbos, and we're not worried anymore. It's very normal to set your alarm clocks way before. He doesn't expound on this here, but I've seen it somewhere else. In Rav Shlomo's Zalman. I don't remember where I brought it here. But in any case, the general consensus of postgame is that you're allowed to use alarm clocks today because our kind of modern day norms are such that we don't set alarm clocks specifically the night before. If anyone has a phone, often, you just set the phone for 7 days a week at a certain time. You don't have to worry about it the night before. And the fact of the matter is that when we hear an alarm clock, generally speaking, we don't think, oh, the guy set it the night before. That's not the first thing that we think. So even though Rav Moshe was machmer on this, but nonetheless, generally speaking, the majority of poskim say that nowadays we're not worried about it. And the minig is to use alarm clocks on Shabbos. What about our other appliances of home appliances? We spoke about dishwashers, washing machines, air conditioners, right? All good questions. So Rav Moshe, of course, is not going to speak about these issues at all, because Rav Moshe doesn't hold of using time clocks. He's very against time clocks, generally speaking. And one of the things he mentions when he speaks about time clocks is indeed Avsha Milsa. He says it's having all these things going on Shabbos, everyone sees them, everyone will think that we're doing stuff on Shabbos. He also says generally it is illicit of Shabbos. You can turn Shabbos into a weekday by using all these time clocks. However, on that issue, ein halacha kamoisei. We all use our time clocks to put on not just lights, but also, Rav Moshe says, what about lights? He says, no, everyone does it. And the same thing is true today about everything. We use our alarm clocks for, we use our time clocks for everything on Shabbos. So first of all, what's the halacha concerning, if we already speak about it, are you allowed to put a timer on to switch on your dishwasher on Shabbos? Okay, the answer is no. Why not? A number of reasons. We have problems of bishul, right? You're heating your water. We have problems of switching on of gram melacha, because by closing the door, right, the dishwashers are not going to go on unless you close the door. So by closing the door, that's a grammar of switching it on. There's a range of problems here of using dishwashers on Shabbos, and I don't want to get into that. But what about on Yom Tov? Okay, on Yom Tov, many of these problems don't apply. So will you be able to use your dishwasher on Yom Tov? Then the main problem will actually be Avsha Milsa, will be this making a noise. Yes, David.
You want to put your clothes in the dryer, right? You want to finish all the preparation food on the dishwasher.
Absolutely good question. And I mentioned this. This is one of the things that we spoke about at the beginning of the shiur, leaving something on from before Shabbos. You're running out of time. You want to put the washing machine on, but you want to leave it from before Shabbos, and it'll go on into Shabbos. Is that a problem of Avsha Milsa or not? So the answer is, first of all, if you're a Sfadi, then you're fine, right? Then you don't have any problems. And this is what Rav and Rav Yosef says, that if you're Sfadi, you don't have a problem, because we go like the Shulchan Aruch, we're not worried about making noise on Shabbos, and then you're fine. The question is, what about if you're going to go like the Ramah, right? And then we are worried about it, because we pass like Beis Hillel. There's no problem of Shvisas Kalim on. There's no Rav Yosef. If we're going like Rav Yosef, then it's mutter. If we're like Rav Yosef, then it's mutter. Rav Yosef said the whole problem is Shvisas Kalim. According to that, then it's not a problem. Correct, because we go like Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel, there's no Shvisas Kalim. So on this issue of Zilus and so on. So now the question would be: is there suspicion? All right, are we going to be suspicious when we hear someone's dishwasher working on Shabbos, on Yom Tov? On Shabbos, it's also for sure. On Yom Tov, or if you leave something from before Shabbos, are we going to be suspicious and say that this guy is putting on his dishwasher or his washing machine or his dryer on Shabbos, right? Based on the Augur, that the Augur says that it's all the question of suspicion. Are we going to worry about this or not? So I think there's two things to think about here. Number one, because the use of time clocks is today very prevalent, it's very normal. Therefore, there's definitely room to say that there won't be any suspicion here, because people will say, yeah, he's using a timer, right? We use timers for everything. We use timers for our air conditioners. We use timers for our Shabbos hot plates. So we use Shabbos for our dishwashers too. Again, on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, it's for sure Asr. On Yom Tov, I wouldn't do it, but let's say there's room to be matir. So then I don't think Avsha Milsa will be a problem, because we use timers. And you mentioned before, what about a very noisy air conditioner unit? Air conditioners are noisy. So should we say that it's Asr to have your air conditioner go on Shabbos because of Avsha Milsa, because it makes a loud noise? I don't think so. I think that it's become prevalent to use timers, so there's not going to be a suspicion. Now, some will say, maybe not, right? Maybe you can't go so far. Chazal made this Isser of Avsha Milsa. We can't take it so far. So I have another suggestion here, throwing it out before the Loimdim, and it's mentioned by the Tzitz Eliezer also. It's mentioned by the Tzitz Eliezer. And the other suggestion will be that the Reichayim is not a Tzorech Shabbos. Reichayim is something which, you're grinding. You can't use your stuff on Shabbos because it's not allowed to bake bread, right, or to knead dough. And therefore, Reichayim is not a Tzorech Shabbos. But when you have something which is a Tzorech Shabbos, then the Tzitz Eliezer already says that he's speaking about sprinkler systems, right? You want to use a sprinkler or a watering system to water your garden. Are you allowed to leave that on Shabbos or to have a timer put it on? And he says, well, Reichayim is a problem because there's no Tzorech Shabbos. So people will say that you're going to work, you're doing stuff which is not, and why you're doing it, I don't know, because for whatever reason. But he says, when we're speaking about sprinklers, that if you don't use them on Shabbos, then it's going to cause you a pseda, things are going to get dry, and like he speaks about, the case that he's speaking about is that it's going to cause you a loss on Shabbos. And the same thing would be true for a dishwasher, let's say, right? That you need it for Shabbos, you need the dishes for Shabbos. Then, says the Tzitz Eliezer, in that case, it could be that Chazal never made this Isser. The only Isser was in the case of something which is not for Shabbos, and then people are going to say, well, you're doing this Isser on Shabbos, which is not the Tzorech Shabbos. But if it's the Tzorech, then he says maybe there was no Gezerah. It's another potential reason to be matir. Another discussion which is important to be had is on microphones. And I'm time sensitive, I know, Ben, I'm finishing. I'm aware. But I just want to mention microphones because this is the big issue on whether microphones, that it's brought in your sources, if you want to hold on to them. It's towards the end in page 7 and page 6, right? Page 6, big tshuva of Rav Shlomo Zalman on using microphones and loudspeakers on Shabbos, and there are many others who have discussed this. And here again, the question is whether there'll be an issue of hashmas koil. There are many problems that are discussed in the context of microphones. Many speak about electrical problems. To be honest, I don't think that there's a big electricity problem in using microphones on Shabbos. You're not causing you're not closing any circuits. You're not causing any electrical function to be activated by using a microphone. There are certain types of microphone, like dynamic microphones, that they go on and off, and you're really causing circuitry to be changed by speaking into a dynamic microphone. But most microphones don't work that way, and therefore they wouldn't have this problem. The Tzitz Eliezer, Chelek Dalet, he says that there's a problem with using microphones because of why? Because people are going to say that you switched it on. All right, people are going to say that you switched it on Shabbos. I think that's difficult. I think you left it on before. Why would people say that you switched on the microphone on Shabbos? It's not something which it's not like a continual thing with wheat that you put the wheat in the whole time. That's a normal way of using it. I think that just like the clock, you leave on the clock before and that's it. So also here, to say that there's such a chashash, I think it's a little bit difficult. And just like we find in Rav and Rav Yosef, for example, on your question, David, the issue of having something on right after Shabbos, Rav and Rav Yosef says this wouldn't be a problem even for the Ashkenazim because they left it on from before. That's a normal thing. So also for microphones, I don't think that would be necessarily a problem. And this would be an interesting case in point in really encompassing questions of microphones. We'd have to speak about it at a different shiur and not now. But I think in terms of Avsha Milsa, I don't think that would be the main concern for a microphone. And we see that all of the poskim are matir to use hearing aids, even though, well, maybe there'd be a concern because we'll think that people left it on or switching it on Shabbos. No, you left it on from before, and that wouldn't be a sufficient suspicion to answer hearing aids or microphones. Anyway, or loudspeakers.